All right. Well, I am delighted to be giving this presentation on my study into user expectations of Otjókahe, which is the online platform for teaching and learning the Dakota Lakota language. And Dakota Lakota, of course, are the indigenous languages of Standing Rock. And I want to start by kind of reaffirming the connection of those languages to the land and the people who have cared for that land for hundreds of years by showing this map here. And in 1851, the United States, of course, signed the Fort Laramie Treaty with the Dakota Lakota people. And this treaty recognized that area that you see highlighted in red as belonging eternally to the Lakota people. The area in kind of purple is the Western Dakota, and then over there in the light blue is the Eastern Dakota. And, you know, at the time this treaty was signed, virtually every person in this land would have spoken, you know, at least one of these three mutually intelligible dialects of the same language. By contrast, best estimates, you know, put today's fluent speaker number at no more than about 1,500 people globally. And a survey done by the Standing Rock Tribal Education Department back in 2017 estimates that about 150 of those live here on our reservation. And you know, of course, since that survey was done, we've lost a lot to the spirit world. But you know, they continue to guide us in the work that we do to revitalize Dakota Lakota language back to health. And I wanted to start by sharing with you the words of one such speaker who lays out for us some of the ways that the government endangered his language in the first place, and also how the elders kept it alive despite all of those challenges. So hopefully you can see this video that I'm sharing.
Understand the spiritual connections with our language, and to think it was outlawed and it was attempts to banish it about 100 years ago through governmental processes, but to really appreciate the sacrifices that elders made to say we're going to continue on, whether you call it going underground or however you want to call it, we're going to continue to share that, and the language is here. There was a time, and here and there, we still hear our language is going to be gone, it's going to be lost. And I understand that. I understand the reality of that. But on the other hand, to hear, as I said earlier, all the young people, a lot of the little children beginning to speak and relearn our language. It's an awesome time to be a Lakota, as they say.
So I just wanted to share that, and you know, the rebirth of his language that he talks about there. You know, when Lala J was chairman back in the 1990s, he used his platform to advocate for many of the language revitalization and maintenance initiatives that helped to engender that rebirth. And some of those initiatives include, you know, teaching Dakota Lakota at the K-12 schools. It includes the Dakota Lakota program at Sitting Bull College. It includes the immersion nest housed at Sitting Bull College. It includes the development of multimedia curriculum materials to assist in those efforts, and you know, a variety of other approaches that I detail in my introduction to the thesis. And the need for kind of, you know, accessible and replicable teaching materials was compounded by COVID-19, you know, which turned teaching on its head kind of globally, and Dakota Lakota language classes were no exception. So in June 2020, the Standing Rock Language and Culture Institute launched an online platform for teachers to access and deliver language courses here at Otjókahe.com. And the name Derek Otjókahe was actually suggested to us by Lala J, and he explained it in a couple of ways. He said, firstly, it can refer to a beginning, because, you know, no matter how much or how little language you were exposed to growing up, you know, the first steps in a language learning journey are the most defining ones. And then the other meaning that he gave to it was Otjókahe can mean taking the lead, being at the forefront, because anyone committing themselves to learning a language is doing an act of service for the tribe, and is setting a shining example for others to follow. And the values of knowledge sharing necessitate that even beginner learners can pass on what they know to others. So June 2020, this was kind of a baptism by fire for Otjókahe, because we released it to the world just out of necessity. But as it gained more usage and as it gained more and more teachers and students using it, I recognized that this site was going to continue playing an important role beyond the pandemic. And I also recognized that in order to truly meet the needs of the community that it intends to serve, then those users will need to have some input into how the site works. And so to formulate that as my problem statement, we could say that number one, no formal or systematic user testing had yet taken place for Otjókahe, for the website. And number two, this kind of goes against the best practices in website building, where users have some input into the design of a site. And number three, it also risks kind of violating a decolonial principle that language revitalization projects should be led by the community. And I'll come back to what decolonial means in this context, in the context of my research, in just a minute. But for now, this problem statement, this problem presented me the opportunity to conduct research, which was kind of action-based, both in terms of generating data that could help determine the priorities for the next phase of development of Otjókahe, and also in terms of helping to foster those feelings of community ownership of Otjókahe among the Standing Rock community. So I had three research questions. Number one, which features of Otjókahe fulfilled the site users' needs and why? Number two, what features do users consider a priority for the next phase of development of Otjókahe and why? And number three, what trends could be seen between the demographic profiles of a user and their needs regarding Otjókahe? And there were, of course, certain limitations that I was able to discover in this research project, and you can find a description of those limitations toward the end of my introduction. The second chapter of my thesis, of course, reviewed the relevant academic literature. And although I didn't divide the chapter into such discernible segments that you see here, there were kind of 7 general themes that emerged among the works that I did review. The first group concerned native language endangerment in general, and then more specifically Dakota Lakota language revitalization. And this included a 2020 paper by Dr. Tasha Hoff, which I believe to date is still the only peer-reviewed publication on Standing Rock language revitalization specifically. Then the second group concerned works on effective language teaching, including the topics of communicative language teaching, and then backward design and spaced repetition. And then I surveyed works about language learning apps, which mostly cater for more commonly taught languages, if you're learning Japanese or Spanish or Russian or something, but also computer-assisted learning more generally. And then the fourth set of works concerned Moodle. Moodle is the open source learning management system, a bit like Genzibar or Canvas or something, but Moodle is the one on which Otjókahe is built, as well as any papers around the integrated features of a Moodle site. Fifthly, I looked at works that specifically tested a learning management system or tested the features of an LMS, because that's what I intended to do with Otjókahe. Then the sixth group includes some of the most interesting papers that I reviewed because they were similarly niche to the focus that I had. These reported on the use of Moodle in a variety of Indigenous education contexts. There was one on a Maori Moodle site in Aotearoa in New Zealand, and there was another on the use of Moodle among Indigenous communities in the state of Jalisco in Mexico. And then finally, number 7, works that I cited at the end to do with the Kano model, which I'll describe in more detail momentarily. Suffice to say, it was an approach to product development that It emerged in Japan in the 1980s and has been refined over the decades since then. So the theoretical framework which I designed for this research took the Kano model, Professor Kano's theory of attractive quality, and kind of intersected it with decolonial research, which I promised to tell you about. This is Linda Tuhiwai-Smith, a Māori academic that I think we actually maybe read some of her work in our, what was it? It was a research methodologies class like years ago now. But, you know, she says that decolonial research is, quote, about centering our concerns and worldviews, and she means Indigenous people's concerns and worldviews, and then coming to know and understand theory and research from our own perspectives and for our own purposes. And when we think about this in the context of Standing Rock, we're reminded of how Sitting Bull centered children. You know, when he said, "Wakaija epicha, let us put our mind together to see what life we can make for our children." And of course, Sitting Bull colleges put this at the heart of their philosophy of what they do. And it's an example of what Linda Tuhiwai-Smith calls researching for one's own purposes. You know, by trying to center Standing Rock folks in my research, whether or not their opinions correlate with the opinions of, you know, outside pedagogical or linguistic experts. I was hoping to honor tribal sovereignty and specifically the control that people have over language revitalization resources that are intended for their use. And then finally, to give you an overview of the Kano model, Noriaki Kano's approach to product development helps to classify a feature's appeal according to user satisfaction relative to the feature's functionality. And a feature, in my case, is a specific aspect of the website. You know, it could be the search function of the website. It could be the interactive videos that form part of some of the courses. And I set out to plot 20 specific features of Otjókahe onto a graph like this. This is a Kano graph. You can see along the y-axis, we see levels of user satisfaction when the feature is functional. And by functional, that means the feature exists and it works as it should. And then along the x-axis, we see the level of user dissatisfaction when the feature is dysfunctional. So either it doesn't work or it's not working as it should. And the Kano model helps us to classify features in 5 different ways that you can see there. And before I talk about the results of my study, I just want to give you some allegorical examples. So in a restaurant, you know, when the service is quick, i.e. functional, we like it a lot. And so we can see along the y-axis, 4 is a good score. We like it a lot. And when service is slow, obviously the dissatisfaction is quite high. And there's a simple linear relationship. You know, the faster the service, the more satisfied we are. And so we classify these features as performance features. By contrast, expected features, these could be the salt shakers on the table. You know, we're dissatisfied when there isn't one, but we're kind of neutral, or we expect it when there is one. And putting 5 salt shakers on the table isn't going to increase our level of satisfaction. So these are our expected features. And then the third classification is the nice to have features. This could be the candies that come with a check in the restaurant. So, you know, we're happy when they're there, but we're not going to be upset if they run out, or we might be a little bit upset, but we're not going to like storm out of the restaurant or eat elsewhere. We're going to feel pretty neutral if that feature doesn't exist. The fourth classification is indifference. So this could be something that the owners of the restaurant have put a lot of thought into, like the particular font that they've used on the menu. But really, the customers aren't really going to care about that. They're going to feel kind of neutral either way. And then finally, the reverse classification. So this is this could be the background music. That's what we see here, that they're kind of blasting, a feature that they thought was going to be nice, but actually makes us go and eat somewhere else. So that's a reverse feature. And when we are putting together a roadmap of future development, the expected features should be top priority, and then the performance features, and then the nice to have features. And as I mentioned, there are 20 specific features of Otjókahe that I wanted to test, and this table, which I think is table 1 in my thesis, lists each of those 20 features together with, in the right-hand column, the actual components of the Moodle site, the Moodle core subsystems and plugins that were being tested. And I wanted to give these kind of technical references, just for, in case there's another community using Moodle that may one day end up reading this paper, it might help them to kind of pinpoint which specific features we're talking about. So if we look on here, feature number 3, for example, is mobile friendliness. And participants in my survey were given a screenshot or a little video demo for each feature. And here we can see a nice mobile-friendly Lakota language lesson that fits well onto a mobile screen. So that's the feature that is being surveyed in this particular question. And for each feature, the first 2 questions form what are called a Kano pair. So the first of the pair asks how a user feels when that feature is functional. So in this case, if the lesson content was mobile friendly as well as desktop friendly, how would you feel? And the participant can choose one of 5 responses. I like it, I expect it, I'm neutral, I can tolerate it, or I dislike it. And then they're asked to imagine if that feature was dysfunctional. Here we have, if the lesson content was a little less pretty on a mobile than on desktop, how would you feel? And again, they can choose one of those 5 responses. And then after each Kano question, after each Kano pair, there was a text box where participants could optionally provide some qualitative feedback about a specific feature. And the data that I was collecting here provided me with a deeper understanding of the individual needs for those features. So I wasn't just learning about the degree to which features were prioritized, but also the qualifiable ways in which a feature could be improved upon. So the full survey is provided as an appendix to my thesis, but now for my actual results. And I'll refer you to chapter 3 for details of how the survey responses are quantified and how they're actually plotted onto this graph, and also to table 4 in chapter 4 for the exact average and average functional and dysfunctional scores for each feature. I'm not going to bore you with all of that now. I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of my results and then to focus in on 4 or 5 of the features, one each from each of which landed in a different classification zone. So there's an overview, and here are the people that I surveyed. As we can see, top left, it was a mix of age groups. Top middle, it was 69% were affiliated with a tribe, whether it was Standing Rock or another one. On top left here, there was a mix of comfort with online learning. Bottom left, usual location. Most were at Standing Rock or another Otjókahe, another Dakota Lakota community outside of Standing Rock. Bottom middle here, the vast majority were learning Lakota. About 6% each were focusing on the Dakota dialects, and then the rest was learning some kind of combination of the 3 dialects. And then bottom right here, most had actually learned another language before they were learning Dakota Lakota via Otjókahe. All right, so first up, I want to give an example of a performance feature. And what you can see here is having a single username and password to access all features of the site, and thus avoiding the need to enter a separate login detail to access any third-party apps within the site. The example you see here is the interactive flashcards, but maybe also to access your Zoom calls, your Zoom classes within Otjókahe. the need to only, you don't need to enter a new username and password at each kind of to use each app within the site. And this was the only feature to be deemed a performance feature. If we look back at our graph here, you can see H. It's the only one that landed in the performance category. And as you can see, it landed pretty close to the the nice to have category, but its prioritization as a performance feature is important because we can conclude that the easier it is to access a third-party app within Otjókahe, the better. Had it landed in the nice to have category, it would have meant that, open authorization would be nice, but we can kind of live without it. So that's how that feature came out. And perhaps unsurprisingly, when I filtered the results to users under age 35, the feature was only seen as nice to have. And I think that, maybe reflects a generational comfort that younger users have with like navigating multiple apps and remembering more login details and things. And the same applied when I filtered for users who identified as having a higher level of comfort with online learning. And virtually all of the qualitative feedback for minimizing logins was positive. Users stating that, quote, simpler always wins, quote, one login is preferred, and even, quote, logins are from the devil, I hate them, was one impassioned user. And another participant even raised the point that even logging into Otjókahe was a step too far for a lot of users, and suggested maybe integrating like a Facebook login or a Google, being able to use a Facebook or Google account to get into Otjókahe. Another factor to kind of consider in road mapping future development is that not every third-party tool allows open authorization. The example that you can see here, which is our interactive flashcards, which is powered by Cerigo, that has a nice open authorization option for a Moodle site. But then there's other tools like Flipgrid or Google Docs that don't have where that kind of integration isn't available. It might be available on Canvas sites, it might be available on Genzabar sites, but it's just not available for Moodle sites yet. Okay, now to move on to the nice to have features. This example that you see here, I'll just let the video demo roll here, is virtual 360-degree tours with interactive vocabulary and questions that go along with it. And these could be used in Otjókahe for a couple of different ways. Here we see
in Lakota country, we have this blessing of having abundant open spaces.
So here's an example of where it's helping users like navigate a culturally important site where we're going around Black Elk Peak here, or it could be used even for like teaching vocabulary in a kitchen domain. You have a 360-degree tour of a kitchen, and you can kind of click on the objects to hear how they're said in Lakota, Dakota. And this fell firmly in the nice to have category. One participant noted that, quote, not a lot of people are physically able to visit these places, and so having even a small virtual snippet would be nice. And the qualitative feedback was generally, was very positive. One said, quote, holy cats, that's awesome. But the fact that this landed somewhere in the middle of the nice to have category is important. And this is kind of one of the strengths of the Kano method, because even though it's a really appealing and positive feature, it might not be the top priority, and kind of Kano helps to balance out, attractiveness against how necessary something is. One of the users wrote, who approved of the feature, wrote that, quote, if the lesson was about locations and there were 360-degree tours for the different locations that we were learning, it would be great. But if we are learning about something completely unrelated to locations, then I don't think that 360-degree tours are entirely necessary, end quote. Okay, thirdly, to give an example of something from the indifferent category, what you're seeing here is the badges feature in Otjókahe. And And as a little aside, I've used Moodle sites before for kind of professional development, personal development courses that I'm taking. And I personally am like really motivated by badges that you kind of win at the end of, scoring certain, fulfilling certain benchmarks and goals. But overall, Otjókahe users were pretty indifferent about the ability to earn badges in their courses. Those who responded positively liked the idea for its kind of motivational value and for helping to track progress. A less convinced user said that, quote, learning should be a moving forward together and not a race. And another even commented that, quote, badging is for hedge funds to bet on us as human capital. I don't like it, end quote. So interestingly, when we filter the responses of tribal members and of learners based in Otjiókahe territory, the badges feature actually lands in the nice to have category. And, I don't have an explanation for that. I think there could be an interesting study there on intrinsic, extrinsic motivational factors that native learners have in learning their language as opposed to non-native learners. But that demographic distinction did exist. And finally, I want to give an example of a feature that landed in the reverse classification. The feature in question here is the separation of teachers' instructions from the course content itself. So this would entail making step-by-step instructions for group activities, an example of which you see here, making these only visible to teachers in Otjókahe. And this idea of separating them actually was considered a reverse feature. That is to say, it would actively annoy users of the site if it was implemented. So the implication here is that the status quo should be maintained, whereby classroom activity instructions are part of the course content, visible both to teachers and to students. This example is, just a step-by-step instructions for a counting game, learning the numbers 1 to 10 in Lakota. So of the 13 respondents who left qualitative feedback for this, 11 spoke positively of being able to see teacher instructions as part of the course. One user invoked the idea of, quote, honest teaching, whereby the teacher levels the playing field between themselves and the students by not hiding information from them. Some users were more on the fence in their quantitative scoring of this feature. Two qualitative respondents suggested like a show hide toggle for displaying the teacher instructions, implying that they may be distracting to some students, but if they have the option, then they can choose. So those are 4 examples of how features landed in different classifications. And lastly, the final question in the qualitative portion of the survey asked students to suggest any features that they felt were missing from Otjókahe. And the participants' responses here can be grouped around 6 specific ideas, which I list here, along with, again, the specific Moodle components that could help achieve those features if they were to be incorporated into a development roadmap. And I want to refer you to the final pages of chapter 4 for more details on these suggested features. But just to give you one example, let's look at number 3, the localization of courses. So, for example, the beginner's course on Otjókahe features a unit on asking, Tukteljatihe, where do you live? And it teaches place names from around Standing Rock. It teaches Long Soldier, Akichitahanska, and Otjókahe for Cannonball. But a language initiative in Pine Ridge, for example, might want to reuse the majority of that unit, but then replace the vocabulary with local place names for their community. So this idea of localization could be achieved in Moodle through a combination of 2 existing features. The first is to give teachers the ability, which can be done in the admin settings, to request a new course. And then the second is through the use of a Moodle plugin called Kickstarter, which allows default Otjókahe courses to be offered as kind of a preloaded template, and then teachers can adapt those kind of template courses into a localized course of their own design. Okay, to conclude, number 1, the results of the Kano survey paired with the qualitative feedback that I saw, provided a clear picture of which features should be prioritized in the next round of development of the site. And the roadmap for development should prioritize perfecting those features that land in the performance class, in the expected class and the performance class, and then move on to those at the top end of the nice to have category before working on any others. Conclusion number 2, the Kano model has proved a useful way to center community voices, which I think is crucial for language revitalization projects. This was a deliberate attempt to include Standing Rock community in the decision-making process involved, in the development of revitalization tools for their language. And I did this because it's been shown that, the most long-lasting solutions for language revitalization are those over which the community feels they have ownership. Conclusion number 3, there is, as I try to demonstrate in my discussion of the results there is a variation in how different demographic groups respond to the same feature. And this finding can help ensure that future development is targeted to Standing Rock language learners. If the developers want to make the site more accessible to elders across Standing Rock, then they can pay attention to the results filtered by age group. Likewise, tribally affiliated users of the site found certain features like the badge feature more appealing than non-native users did. So this data helps developers ensure that their needs can be met first. And conclusion 4, my hope is that this study can serve as a model for any other education technology projects that intend to serve Indigenous communities. And I ended my thesis by identifying some opportunities for future research. Number 1, researching the natural decay of delight. So one of the distinctive features about the Kano theory of attractive equality is the notion of a life cycle of features. A feature that is initially deemed nice to have by its users will over time be considered a performance feature and eventually an expected feature. And we can think about this in the context of buying a cell phone. Like a long time ago, having a camera on the front of your phone was kind of like a nice to have feature, but over time we've just come to expect that now. Like we probably wouldn't buy a phone without it. So it'll be interesting to see if any of those features shift over time as users become more accustomed to using Otjókahe. Number 2 is the idea of doing an impact effort approach to development road mapping. My study focused on the subjective needs of Otjókahe users, but in reality, these are going to have to be balanced out by the effort that the tribe puts into developing the site, the amount of time, the amount of money they have available. So an impact effort survey would help to balance those things out. Idea number 3 is researching with other user experience testing methods, such as moderated usability testing, click testing, or tree testing. Number 4, the use of the analysis of Moodle analytics and assessment data. So all Moodle sites generate a lot of objective data about how distinctive features of the site are being used. So this includes information about students' participation rates, attempts at activities, quizzes, completed activities. I'm sure there's kind of a similar feature in Zanzibar, but a potential future study could make use of these analytics to compare the efficacy of delivering content via one tool versus via another tool. And idea number 5 is researching the effectiveness as Otjókahe as an actual language learning tool. So such a study would measure Otjókahe, its effectiveness as an intervention in Dakota Lakota language learning. We could use pre-assessments versus a post-assessment to see how much they've learned in terms of actual language content, as opposed to the technical features of the site. And a study like this could help to investigate the course content, the scope and sequence of the course content, as well as its cultural relevancy, clarity, tone, breadth, depth, and so on. Anyway, these are questions for another time. And for now, I am delighted to have reached this stage in my journey. And I want to say Wapila Tranka for your guidance and your patience over the last 3 years, and for giving me your attention today. And I guess, I don't know how this works, but I guess I'll be happy to take questions at this point.
Kahe Chanu. I guess I'll start with some questions. Your work is really amazing. I think I saw a presentation prior to when the website was actually launched, so I wasn't sure that the website is actually launching, but I think that was pre-COVID at the big education consortium here on Standing Rock before the school year, and I remember talking about it. So it's cool to see that like it's up and running, and that you also have feedback from the users for it. That is really awesome. So I'm gonna have to check it out, because I haven't seen the website yet and used it. So I'm excited to, once we're done with this, to check it out. Also too, like your location mapping with the language and also the clips with the elders, that reminds me so much of similar project that Dakota Goodhouse is doing, where he's actually creating his own like decolonized maps of different historical sites that is actually like used for posters, and also on his scouting website, where I think like, and he's from Standing Rock to like even bridge those connections, because they're so mutually compatible, where it could really enrich both of the projects that you're doing here on Standing Rock, and also what he's doing up there at United Tribes with his project. So just kind of something to think about. And then that decolonized framework, I just, because I don't know what the website actually is entailed, but, you know, is there any component for like a common place, or, you know, where, you know, like we have all these resources and they're all over the place, and people are doing open sourcing now for like Lakota language to kind of share this without having to go through like publication and ownership, then who has ownership property rights, that even on a website like this user platform to allow, you know, like elders and language speakers just to compile all their knowledge. I mean, that would have to be something that would be revised and looked at to make sure that the content is good, or some kind of directions of like, you know, if you have knowledge to share, you know, this is the format of how to maybe share it, so that way you can include everybody else, almost like a second brain. If you've ever looked at like Diego Forte, you know, like, could we create a second brain on this website too, of Indigenous learners and also speakers, to then create this common place that can be shared for everybody? Because it's really hard, I think, for second language learners to navigate all these different materials and sources and how to go about it. Anyway, just some other concepts that I was thinking about with that kind of, I don't know if that would align with the decolonized framework. And then also the component of badges, and how you mentioned that that resonated more with your Native American participants in this survey. That reminded me so much of a conversation I had with Corey Spotted Bear, who's 3 affiliated tribes. And he was saying like, how do our boys in school, you know, earn their feathers? How do they, you know, what's a C or a B to them? But, you know, saying like, you've obtained this knowledge, you know, you earned your feather. And me as an educator hearing that, it reminds me of like badges and leveling up and gamification. So like what you said was very complimentary to what I just heard, you know, so that was kind of cool to hear that in the data as well. But other than that, those are my comments, and great work. So
thank you. Yeah, I'll respond real briefly to a couple of those comments. The first one about accessing the website. Yeah, this site really has evolved a lot since its kind of launch of necessity in June 2020. And one of the, the way that it's been used so far is mostly in K-12 schools, at Sinimul College, and at South Dakota State University. So these are used kind of in classes where teachers would enroll their students into courses. And one of the things, I didn't present on it today, but one of the features that I did ask participants about is this idea of guest access, whereby anyone can sign up for a course. They don't have to be enrolled in NAS 101 or whatever to be able to get to the content. A lot of people have asked for this, can I just get on the website and start learning and kind of do a self-paced a self-paced version of the course. In fact, that's another. I asked about guest access, and I asked about self-paced courses differently. And I remember certainly for guest access, there was, I think it actually ended up in the indifferent category, and not because people felt indifferent about it, but because there was a real diversity of opinion. Some people really believed in this idea of guest access. You know, we've got to make this accessible. We've got to make this as readily available to anyone who wants it. And then on the other hand, there were people who were opposed to guest access because, you know, they've kind of been burned by some of the cultural appropriation out there, some of the, you know, just kind of putting it out there on the internet for anyone to learn. So there was a real diversity of opinion. And interestingly, if I recall correctly, that opinion didn't map perfectly to any demographic group. Like even, you know, within native users, there was a variety of opinions. So it's going to be a tough decision to make about how to, like, you know, provide that more, you know, so you don't have to be enrolled in a higher education institute or a K-12 school to be able to access this. And then just to touch on your third point, Derek, about the idea of a database of resources, I agree that is something that is so desperately needed. Like there are a lot of resources out there for learning Dakota Lakota, but it is hard to keep track of them because they're all over the place, and some of them are harder to get to than others. And, you know, it's great that people share them on Facebook and so on, but once you know, give it a couple hours and you got to scroll back a mile to be able to get back to that on Facebook. So having a central point where people can access these resources is actually one of the features. When I asked for other suggested features, let's see where it was. I think under number 2, more audio-visual language resources was how I kind of surmised that. But there is a nice module within Moodle sites. It's called a database module, where you can really democratize contributions to that. You know, students and teachers can add entries to this database. They can drop a link in there. If it's an external website, they can upload an image or a video or a document, and you can make it searchable. So if you're looking specifically for you know, a topic that you want to teach about, you can tag it with keywords and so on. So that feature is available. You know, could be built in Moodle. It could be built many other ways, I'm sure. And I know that Dr. Hoff, again, to mention her again at SDSU, is either looking for funding or maybe just wants some funding to build something like this. So hopefully we won't have to be complaining about this in a year's time.
Hey, Elliot.
Hey.
It's Mafani. Nice presentation.
Good to hear you.
I'm sorry I came a little late. I had sick kids and I've been
Otጇkahe.
to keep them out of trouble spilling. I did listen to your presentation, and one of the things that's really interesting to me is you mentioned something about ownership by the tribe. What the tribe needs to do to take this, upgrade it or upscale it, you know, claiming ownership. How far has that gone? You know, have you spoken to tribal council? Does tribal council know that this is like an important tool for learning the language?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I maybe mentioned this just before you arrived, but the kind of initial instance of the website, the initial version of the website, was developed by the Standing Rock Language and Culture Institute, which is part of the tribal education department at the tribe. But in terms of, so it, you know, it is a tribal project, and I kind of had to walk the line a little bit because I'm an employee of the tribal ed department. I've been heavily involved in the development of this website, and I'm also researching it. I had to, you know, try really hard to remain objective, you know, and not take anything personally if someone didn't like a feature. So I have been involved in that project in that way, but it is still, you know, the intellectual property of the tribe, because that's who I'm working for as I've been developing this site. And it's, you know, if I left that job, it would be up to the tribe to decide, you know, if they want to continue maintaining and developing the site. So it is already a tribal project, but certainly more awareness needs to be raised as to its existence and the fact that it is a useful learning tool. You know, I'm sure unless you've been enrolled in a NAS course at SBC, or you've been enrolled, you know, in Victoria Birdshead class at the elementary school, you might not be aware of the website. So there is more awareness and more of a feeling of ownership that needs to be generated. And I think this research will help do that, because we can say now, you know, if we can go back to tribal council next year and say, hey, we want to apply for a grant to do a second round of development on this site, and you know, here's Standing Rock user input. You know, here's some input to really show that this is needed and wanted, and the ways in which it is needed and wanted, as opposed to just my opinions on how it should be. Then I think the data of this research could actually could help do that.
Let me see. Just an added question to that. So just quick, is the link to this on Standing Rock Sioux Tribe's website?
That's a good point. No, it's not at the moment. We should, it's, you know, people have just accessed it via the URL Otjókahe.com. I've been talking with the internal affairs, let's see, what's his title? Internal Affairs Director, I think, at the tribe, because we actually have a couple digital projects. This is just one of them. We have another digital project that we're developing, which is sort of a database for language recording. So specifically video recordings, textual documents, and so on, written in Dakota, Lakota, to help facilitate access to those. So that will be another website, and we need those to be integrated into the main Standing Rock Sioux Tribe main website so that people can easily find them.
Okay, awesome. So I suppose my follow-up question to all these brilliant responses is therefore going to be, if you were to take, let me say, 2 messages, like really important from your research to tribal council. So if tomorrow you woke up and, you know, I don't know, Derek or Chris or Travis came to you and said, the chairwoman says she read what you had and she was interested, and she invited you over to tribal council, and you had to do 2 or 3 messages to convince them that this is important, what will be the messages?
Dang. Well, that's a really interesting question. I think number one is, I probably wouldn't show them this graph, but I could pull there is a point that I kind of want to pull from this graph. We can see here that the vast majority of the features that I was asking about landed in this nice to have category, which tells me something. It tells me that all of these, you know, the vast majority of these features were found to be attractive, were attractive to learners of Dakota Lakota. So in this way, the website as a whole is a really attractive way that people want to build into their language learning journey. Let's see, message number 2, I think, is that this, one of the features that I surveyed about, as I was mentioning to Derek earlier, was this idea of self-paced courses. And if I remember correctly, that was a feature that most people felt quite indifferent about, which told me something. It told me that the connection that students have with a teacher is really important in language learning. You know, we can self-study on our own, we can use a book, we can use a grammar reference, and those things are great. I'm not like dismissing those, but there's a really important interpersonal community aspect to language learning that people really value. And this website facilitates that. You know, it's not just a reference tool. You can have video classes in there. You can have those videos of elders. You know, that one of Lala J, we have a lot of videos like that that are built into these courses. So a tool like this can really help nurture some of that interpersonal aspect of language learning that I think was a priority, like never mind the pandemic. Like, people were looking for these tools just because of like the geographic reality of Standing Rock. Like not everyone has the time or gas money to drive up from Bear Soldier to 48 to take classes. You know, this is a way of making classes more accessible online, regardless of the, of the pandemic. So yeah, I'd maybe sleep on those responses a little bit and word them a bit better before I step out in front of tribal council, but
But I know this year alone, we've had a couple of students who've called and wanted to take, you know, online Lakota courses, you know, but we're not really designed yet to actually be able to do that. But, you know, there are people that are navigating into Lakota language teaching on various reservations, and they need that support, but also at the same time being able to function in their current position. So to have something that's actually developed that's user-friendly, that can be integrated into a course to actually teach it online would be huge for meeting the demographic need of the current work environment, and also the access to language learning so they can do that. Right now in Bismarck Public Schools, I mean, there's a push and a drive for the want to offer Indigenous language, Lakota, Dakota language specifically in BPS, but you know, there's always the issue of like not only just who's going to teach it, but also the curriculum support to actually help the teacher do that. And the reality of the world now is, you know, online resources, gamification, all these other concepts where, you know, we can create that support for our teachers so that way they can go into the classroom and feel like they're supported and they can be effective teaching the language. So I think this is a really big need that hopefully can further develop and also address the support that's needed for the teachers. So it's awesome.
thank you.
Elliot, not any real questions that didn't get answered already through Derek and Mafani, but just very impressed with the work here, the writing, the research, the putting it all together in regards to you know, your topic, your idea. I mean, there's tremendous great information here that I think, besides for you guys to be able to use there in rebuilding the or the second version of the website that many of us could probably also use in regards to, as you mentioned, trying to build or look at other technology features for education, you know, as we try to incorporate more online hybrid user online user stuff. So this is, I think, tremendous, great job, and more than happy to be patient on it. I'm sure there is no one that wanted to get done more than you did, but very good job on this, and I'm very impressed.
Thank you. That means a lot. It was yeah, I mean, obviously it was a topic that I felt passionate about, and I think because of that I wanted to get it right. Like I didn't want to rush it to do a half-assed job, but I will also be glad to to kick this one out of the door, because it's been a long time coming, and yeah, it feels a long time since I was in master's classes. So actually, to get the thesis out is a big relief.
Elliot, I got a few questions. So what would you say were some of the most difficult things that you encountered and how you overcame them in your thesis journey?
That is a great question. I suppose one thing I really struggled with early on was finding a model that I could use for carrying out this research. And I remember in the early days talking, you know, having conversations with Dr. Mongol about, you know, there's the there's various models of kind of customer satisfaction that we had talked about, and I never felt entirely comfortable with any of them. One of them that I considered was the technology acceptance model, which I think in one of my early iterations of chapter 3 I talked about, but I ended up abandoning that just because I couldn't find an easily a readily available tool for actually doing the data analysis. There were others that I considered that I kind of shied away from because they were much too focused on this idea of like a product and customers. And even though, you know, you can talk about Otjókahe as a product because it is a, you know, it is a tangible resource. I didn't, you know, the idea of like products and customers and that kind of like capitalist language made me feel kind of uncomfortable because you hear so often from the elders that, you know, you shouldn't, these sorts of resources should be free of charge, and you shouldn't mix, you know, money and culture and money and ceremony and so on. So some of those models I kind of felt uncomfortable using. And so when I came across the Kano model, it was like, it was a breakthrough. It was a game changer. And I don't know why it took me so long to come across it. But once I found it, I was just like, I was so relieved that someone had thought about these things before and I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. And there was a nice, easy tool for doing that data analysis. So I'd say really until I found that, that was the greatest challenge that I had to grapple with.
Was that theoretical framework?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Couple other questions. I know that this online course, it was an introductory course. In moving forward, say a intermediate level course, knowing what you know now, how would you move forth, and what changes would you make then in that online delivery with all these widgets and applets or applications?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're right that the course that most participants had used is a beginner's course. It's, you know, it could probably be used in a 3 or 4 credit semester-long course. And a lot of that course content had been developed in offline scenarios before it was kind of turned into its Otjókahe manifestation. And, you know, I got to credit people like Nicole Walker and Sunshine Carlo and other language teachers who helped develop that content in its offline format before we turned it online. And we have a lot of intermediate level stuff that we are kind of like dying to turn into a Otjókahe course. And I think as we do that, some of the things I would think about are, number one, the interactive flashcards that you briefly saw in one of those demo videos. Students love them. Students love them because it gives them, it's an easy way to review vocabulary. It uses a space repetition algorithm, so it kind of, it figures out for you when you're ready to review a word, as opposed to just kind of sitting there and desperately trying to memorize 100 words. It will drip feed those words when your brain is in the right state to receive them. And people love those flashcards. I think we would make an effort to make sure that we have interactive flashcards accompanying every single unit of content. Another thing I would consider is we've used a couple of different Moodle modules for the course presentations themselves. So that's kind of like the textbook component of the units, you know, where you have maybe some grammar explanations, you have an elder video, you have some example dialogues. And I don't want to get kind of too technical with it, but we've been using one format, which is really nice because it's kind of mobile friendly. It's a bit like using Google Slides. You know, each page is basically a slide that you can kind of navigate through. But the disadvantage of that is that it's not very printer friendly. And often when these courses are used in a real life context, we might have participants in the class who just want a printed version of the course. You know, they might be less tech savvy and they prefer having paper in hand. So there's another module in Moodle called the book module. And if we kind of, you know, transfer content over to that format, they're going to be much, you know, you can export them as PDFs, you can print them really easily. And you're kind of less constrained by having to fit everything into a single slide. So that might give us more freedom. That would be something we could experiment with in higher levels.
Okay, thank you for the detailed response. I got one other question, and it might actually be more than one question, and it has to do with, you mentioned the Moodle data management platform, and I suppose the other applications fall into play there, because you had 20 different areas that you analyzed. And so when it comes to having this open source, you mentioned that by there's something that you can change in Moodle. So someone that's developing a course with a different language, they could plug some of these different words in, and I'm generalizing here a bit, but is this something that would be open source, or are we talking something that would be proprietary? Because, you know, there's a lot of time, and, you know, we're talking money and time, you know, for this. We can all see that this entailed a lot of commitment, more than one person working with this. And I see the importance of wanting to share it, but at the same time, has there been discussion about whether it should be open source or proprietary?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think there's kind of two things there. There's, you know, open source in terms of making the code freely available to other, you know, developers. And then there's open access in terms of the content itself. So one of the great advantages of using Moodle is that it's an open source platform. All of the plugins are open source. Certainly all of the plugins that I've used have been, haven't costed a thing. There are other plugins where you maybe need a monthly subscription to integrate it. And I've just kind of avoided those. And I think, you know, I feel like generally in the, I don't know, I feel like because we're using open source, we want things that we create to continue to be open source as well. When it comes to open access, you know, actually access to the content, you know, this sort of project does take time, and it does take money, and it takes effort. And but at the same time, I think we feel like, you know, people have had, we just have to make language learning as accessible as possible to any Dakota Lakota person, and money should never be a hindrance or an obstacle to them learning. You know, there's been so many historical obstacles to learning language, and you know, everything we do has to be geared towards removing those obstacles, kind of guided by this belief that, you know, the language that we're working with is not ours. It belongs to the next generation, or it belongs to the 7th generation. So it's not kind of, it's not ours to make money off. It's but at the same time, there is that reality, as you say, that this sort of thing takes time and money to invest in it. And so there, I think, is a need for maybe seeking out more grant funding to help this thing continue, where we can pay people to do this work, but still maintaining the idea of it being free to the point of the learners.
Right. I guess I should clarify what I was getting more at had to do with other languages beyond Lakota, Dakota, you know.
Yeah.
And is it just something where, you know, someone, oh, this is really cool, and then then you know, they don't have to do any work themselves. It's like, oh, they can just, you know, plug it in themselves for a different language. That's more about what I'm getting at. You know, I understand.
Right. And that would be a I think that would be a really interesting thing that we'll have to consider at some point. I think right now, because most of the content is kind of behind a login, there maybe aren't a lot of people from other language communities who are aware of it. But, you know, there may be a point where, let's say, Hidatsa community come to us and say, hey, we want to do this for our tribe. Like, I think there'd be a general feeling of, yes, we want to support you, kind of intertribal solidarity. It might be a little different for like a more commonly taught language. Like let's say someone wants to make a French language course. You'd feel like there'd be less of an ethical need to, make things freely available to them. But, I think in their case, like there are so many tools out there for learning more commonly taught languages that have a lot of money behind them, a lot of development. And, I kind of wish that one of those platforms would approach us and say like, we want to support you making a Lakota Dakota platform. Because all of this is we're kind of making it up as we go along. Like we're just learning this stuff, but there are, companies out there that have invested millions into developing, top class language learning tools. And it would be nice for Lakota Dakota communities to feel the benefit of those too.
I know that when I was the principal in White Shield, the Arikara language, the school was invested in over $1 million with the University of or Indiana University in Bloomington. There's a gentleman that I think spoke like 15 different languages by the name of Dr. Bird, and every now and then he would propose, oh, we need more money. And so they had this software program that they had developed there at the university. But I just thought, that's a lot of money, to be, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, they did develop a software tool, but
yeah, as you were saying that, I just remembered the fact that when South Dakota State University expressed their interest in using this for their students, we actually signed a agreement with them between the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and SDSU, whereby SDSU pay a subscription fee to use this. So the students themselves don't feel that. It's the administration. They have this kind of money available for curriculum materials, and they can invest back into the tribe for future development. It's not a lot of, it's a very reasonable subscription fee, but it just, it means that, maybe as other higher education institutes that have this sort of money available, they could follow that same model of investing back into development of the platform.
Well, yeah, even almost like a regenerative design where like institutions like K-12 schools have funding for curriculum. So that should expand also to Lakota language curriculum for their teachers that then can go directly to free access for their students, and then also can fund, additional projects down the road. Because even though you want to free source something, I mean, the time that it took you to create this and people to create content, is a lot of time that still counts for something. But I'm sure you probably already know this, but there's decent amount of like smaller grants with the Wikinia initiative at SDSU, and with Tasha being there, that's always a great opportunity for future collaboration to keep developing this project further. So, and then all you have to do is like a TED Talks, right, to get like the idea out there, right? So a platform picks it up. So maybe the next step, I don't know.
Yeah, whoever's watching this on YouTube a year down the line, get in touch.
okay, well thank you, Elliot. That's all I have for questions. Does anyone else have any questions?